So, before we get started, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. I'll introduce myself. My name is Marcus Morgan. I've been a bisexual activist since in the late 20th century. And I'm currently a professional magician and public speaker, focusing on bisexuality within my work. And over here we have...
Hello, my name is Carly Halse. I'm a bi-queer actor, writer, director, teacher. I'll basically do most things if someone gives me some money to do it. No.
It's a bit early.
No, hang on, just coming back slightly. That'll be the first of many because my mouth runs away before my brain catches up. My pronouns are she, they, and I am wearing yellow and black tartan trousers and a white t-shirt today, and I've got glasses, because of course I have.
Hi, I'm Sam Murray. I'm a bisexual musician and music academic. My pronouns are he, him, and I am wearing jeans, a black t-shirt, and a kind of floral top, and a brown short hair, and also wear glasses.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Oh my god, turn my mic up. I am a bisexual podcaster. I am 1/3 of the Receipts podcast, and I am a singer-songwriter. What else am I? Oh, I'm a badass bitch. And, oh yeah, and I am wearing a oversized denim thing and some cowboy boots, so I'm going to two different occasions. Oh, Milena Sanchez! That would be great. I'm Milena Sanchez, everyone.
My name's Pacheanne Anderson. I'm a gallerist, art consultant and curator who establishes and develops the careers of black, queer and trans artists, visual artists. Oh, pronouns, he, they.
Oh, pronouns, she, her.
Cool. I didn't know we were doing clothes, so hello. I'm also wearing glasses. I have a large comedy moustache, and I'm wearing things from a variety of charity shops, mainly a brownish jacket and bluish trousers, and a t-shirt with a police box on, for no particular reason. I'm not a geek or anything. Pop culture. So we've got some questions from beforehand, and there's going to be a Q&A where we're going to get you to offer up some questions as well. The Q&A is supposed to be the last 10 minutes. We might bring that forward a bit, because we've only got, well, our questions. There's so many of you, and I can see you're going to have such great questions or ways you want the discussion to go in, that I think we might bring that forward a bit. But first, let me throw some of these to our panel here. And of course, if you've got things you want to say on this, please do feel free to go off on tangents. It's okay. We're not, it's not a game show. We're not getting points. If you
What?
Yeah, I know. There's no prizes. If you don't have anything on that particular topic, then we'll come back to you with a different topic. Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. And if you haven't got a question, you don't have to worry about having a question either. It's all going to be very relaxed and soft focus here.
And it's a no judgment zone.
Yes.
We can all have open discussion and not feel like we're being judged.
It's okay to have favourites in pop culture. Sometimes some of those favourites are slightly problematic sometimes, it turns out, suddenly, after 10 years, when she opens her mouth. But it's okay. I'm going to kick off with one of these. And that is there a particular piece of representation that you've seen in recent years that has really made you catch your breath and go, oh, we have come a long way? Something that's made you notice the gradient But sometimes we spend so much time working our way up, we forget how far things have come.
I think for me personally, like being a musician and listening to music where, you know, straight people can just have that and it's just like for them, and then listening to a song where a woman is talking about another woman and I'm like, oh my God, there is a song there that I feel like I'm completely seen, or that I can dedicate to another woman and it makes sense, and it's not a thing where I'm just like, oh, change the boy to a girl every single time. So it's like having that music that is available to us, and having artists such as like Kalani, Victoria Monet, you know, groups like the internet where women are just so open about loving other women, and it's just like, oh wow, I did not have this when I was younger or even in my teens, to now being in my 30s and listening to music that I can fully relate to. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're doing some things.
Yeah, I think for me it's actually a piece of theatre, and I'm going to embarrass somebody in the room. Right at the back of the room is the writer Stephen Leach, who did an absolutely fantastic play.
Hi, Stephen!
Hi, Stephen! Wrote an absolutely fantastic play about the bi-male experience called Can't Wait to Leave, and it was one of the first times I've actually like seen my own experience on stage, going through all the kind of difficulties that the character goes through. And it was just really amazing to actually see, you know, things that are similar to your own life story being presented that way within popular culture. Because I think that there is a lot of, well, I don't have to tell this room, there's a lot of bi-erasure that happens, but we do see within certain pieces of theatre where they seem almost afraid to say the word bisexual, whereas Stephen's writing, I think, really grasps that, and really, you know, the fact that within the first, what was it, like the first 5 minutes or something, the character is openly talking about bisexuality is such a really, really important thing. And yes, I think Stephen is hopefully going on tour with the play as well, so hopefully everyone can catch it out.
I mean, I have to, of course, mention our Lord and Saviour, Nick, I'm by actually Nelson, obviously, in this conversation. I think, you know, some people have got some less than favourable opinions about Heartstopper, but for me, I think being able to watch something like that, and also I work with young people, and like hearing them talk about it and discuss it, and so openly and so lovingly and with such joy, just really felt like such a gorgeous moment that just, I think, you know, I'm in my 30s and growing up under Section 28, we didn't, you know, that was my entire education, bar like the last year of sixth form. Too late by then, but we didn't even know. I think the worst thing about the legacy of that is how much we didn't really know that was in existence, and it that was just life. And I think there's something really beautiful and joyful about a program that is predominantly aimed at young people being such like a sort of a joyful experience. It's, you know, like, although it deals with some darker issues, but it's a feel-good show, and I think, I don't know, it just makes me really happy that like young people have that and have access to that now.
I love that for young people. There's a bit of me that's like a little bit jealous. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, okay, cool. Not that I'm envious in a way that I'm like, oh damn, you lot should suffer or struggle as much as I feel like, you know, other people have. But also, I'm just like, you lot have this fluidity that's just like so amazing to witness. Even though I feel like personally we're nowhere near where we need to be when it comes to queer people, but I do feel like, oh my God, you have so many people there that could represent you, and it's so amazing for you, like, you know. Yeah, I love that.
For me, the answer's no, and I'm still seeking that, and I don't know if that journey is necessarily at the forefront of my existence, because a lot of the representation I see of myself is with the people I surround myself with, and kind of as an artist and in that space, if you just go by like proportion and ratios of who's queer anyway, we're there. So for me, there hasn't been any sort of standout moments or like wow, I feel seen. It's just I have always felt seen because of the spaces I've existed in. And it was interesting to hear your point about music, because I feel like I'm the youngest here. I don't want to assume. But I came up through like the early days of kind of Frank Ocean and the internet, and those people.
You're the lucky one I talk about there.
Yeah, so those people were there for me, and maybe not in such an explicit way, and it didn't need to be, because visibility and safety and all that stuff, especially when talking about the black experience, like people like Frank Ocean, just through lyrics, I was like, cool, me too, and that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, that leads us on to an interesting point, I think, one of the other questions we got from beforehand, which is, why does it matter? If you're watching something, a character being played by an actor, or a piece of music recorded by a musician, or a book written by an author, or a stand-up comedian, why does it matter that the person has an identity of a specific kind, as opposed to the work they're doing? What's the importance of it being people of that identity, speaking of that identity? We should be able to speak about anything. If we're bisexual, we should be able to talk about green politics just as much as talk about race, as much as talk about disability, just as much as talk about, you know, if we're stand-up, I don't know what stand-up's talk about, quality of jam at the local fete, that sort of thing. Stand-up's probably quite cosy, isn't it? I'm picturing it being quite cosy these days. Stand-up. Getting some shaking heads. What's the relevance? What's the importance for us as other creators, or as indeed consumers of art, that the person just happens to be bisexual?
I sit on the fence with this, because I'm like, why should I have to stand here and just be like, I'm a bisexual woman and I'm this and that, when I feel like that automatically, with you even not seeing what it is that I've created, I feel like I'm already judged. But then there's another part of me that I'm like, no, stand proud in it, because you don't know who is consuming that art, that song, or that podcast that you've created. And you get to, like, there's so many of us that feel so alienated most of the time, and I feel like just saying I'm a bisexual woman, they can relate to that. And I feel like that's, who turned my mic off? That was a good point. If you didn't like what I was saying, you could have just told me. No, I'm joking. But yeah, I feel like there's that representation that comes with it that I feel like is super important, more important than what you lot are judging, to be honest, personally.
Industry you're in again. So for the art space, I don't think it's necessary for it to be advertised, the identities of the artists, right? Because if you're interested in the work, if you're coming to the exhibitions, if you're going to see the programming, if you're going to come to the conversations, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to discuss the content of the work and potentially just talk to the artist as well, because they're around. So for me, that's where it's important to then spark up conversations about identity once you're in the space, because if you come into a space curated by someone of my identity, you're gonna be in a space where there's a plethora of black artists, queer artists, trans artists, neurodiverse people. I don't have to tell you that. And then there's also a safety element to it, because a lot of artists, they might have other names they use through exhibitions, not everyone's in a position of privilege to be as proud. That's a very white-centric understanding. And then that's why I'm always on the fence, because you want to talk about representation, but then you don't want to talk about kind of the social, political implications of that for marginalized groups anyway. So that was my response to kind of that, but also my experience of my industry. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Sam, do you want to say something?
I mean, essentially, it's our choice as artists where we want people to interact with that identity that we have. For me, as a musician, one of the things I found really interesting was I was actually out to myself on the stage as a performer before I was out to any of my friends, any of my family, because I felt that as a performer, that was the space on the stage I could truly be my most authentic self.
Same.
And I found ways to kind of, you know, engage with that in how I would be, how I would behave, and I didn't feel like I had to censor anything. I could just be my purest, most authentic self. And it was quite interesting because I want to try and still be in my day-to-day life. I don't think I'm the same as I am as a person on stage. And I really want to have that strength and that confidence and really interact with that more. But also I think as well, there's some time I found that I took a decision to start coming out to other artists and to start telling them. And I actually found that then they started coming out to me and being like, oh, actually, there's someone I can talk to about some of these specific issues that I've faced. So, I mean, I'm not going to throw out statistics because I don't have any to hand, but in Vineet Mehta's book, there's discussion, for example, about arts funding and funding in general not coming to bisexual artists, even when there's a pot of money for LGBTIQA+. Hardly any of that is coming our way. And if we can have discussions with other artists to say, look, we know this is an issue, if we come together and, you know, raise hell about it and try and make that change, maybe that can happen. But it's really important that, you know, as artists, it's our choice, our agency, whether we want to project that identity. So whether it matters or not is, yeah, it's up to you.
It's interesting as well, because it's a catch-52, because as much as I could say public-facing stuff, I don't have to mention this, blah, 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 but if there's certain funding that an artist I'm working with might want to apply to, if there's funding I as a gallery want to apply to, they have to have the tick boxes. You are instantly tokenized. So that's the friction. But publicly, it's a choice. But then obviously when it comes to the actual like logistics of us being able to do the work as creators, we have to label who we are, which is a shame.
And I think even talking about the difficulty is sitting down and actually realizing with yourself, you know, who it is that you're attracted to, who it is that you're becoming, who it is that you want to be. I feel like that within itself is such a difficult conversation, like with you, like forget about everybody else. I feel like sitting down and actually realizing, because you know how society is going to view you and everything else that comes with it, and then now it's like family and you're trying to figure things out, and I feel like that within itself is just so difficult to deal with.
Yeah, I think I really resonate with what you said, Sam, in that it took me a long time to come out, and I think one of the first places I felt like I could truly explore being myself was on stage. And I guess for me, like there's a joy in community. So if I know that a piece of art that I'm consuming or have sought out is by someone from my community or who I share an aspect of that with, that feels really important to have, because I didn't have that for so long. Do you know what I mean? But I really agree with you. So I guess it's a really difficult. I think it's very hard to come down one side or the other on that, because I think it's a very individual decision to make, I suppose, as an artist about. And I think that's true. I think that's true of a lot of things, but particularly the creative industries. We're asked to give so much of ourselves sometimes. Yeah. We are asked to give all of our stuff, because that's true art. Is the giving of self. And you know, I guess there's also some arguments to be made about how safe that is, and whether you should do that, or whether that expectation should be there.
That's why I was an artist for about less than a year after graduating, was early accepted into programs for black, queer and trans people. I said, fuck this. I don't even make work that's about that. I'm just an artist. It's one of the reasons why I quit, because it pigeonholes you. As well, it allows opportunities. It's also very pigeonholing. Like long term, so it's a decision that you have to make individually.
I was like, you lot, I had come out on my podcast before I had to come out to my family, and it's so funny. Well, no, it's not funny, but it's funny because I remember there was so many events that I was approached to do, and I was like, you lot, do you want my family to kill me? Like, I actually can't do this. And it was really, really sad that I could feel like I could be my complete self in this space, but then when it came to like social media and being tagged in things, I'm like, yo, I actually can't repost that because my mum stalks the hell out of me on Instagram, and if I repost this, she's gonna be looking at me like I don't understand what's happening.
For me, it didn't really feel like a choice that I could make fairly. I went into performance from being an activist in public speaking, and I just remembered the crushing, sudden wham of loneliness when I was in a huge room full of people, all having a great time, all laughing along to the drag queen, very, very funny, wonderful. They make a joke about bisexuality. And then suddenly, I'm completely on my own. I'm on my own, surrounded by people, braying their heads off at the idea that the very existence of people like me is a funny joke. And that crushing and immediate loneliness was one of the things that said to me, if you're going to do performance, it's got to be for the person who's just heard that joke. And a couple of years after that, I was on the cabaret stage at London Pride, and the person who was on before me did all of the, oh, if you're gay, give us a round of applause, yeah, all the lesbians, ooh, all the bisexuals, oh, there can't be that many of you. They should make your minds up. Wow.
Yeah.
Oxford Street's that way. And then when I came on stage, I overran, because I started off by saying, hello, welcome here. And by the way, you are all welcome here, especially the bisexuals. Don't let anyone tell you there's too many of you or you shouldn't be here. And I could see in the back of my peripheral vision, side of the stage, the drag queens being quietly chatted to by a volunteer. And then when they come back on after me, they're like, oh, well, of course. Because, and this is one of the reasons why I set up Cabaret, which is a bisexual cabaret night. I think it's really important in any work that we can see our reflection. Humans are brilliant at spotting faces, most of us, some of us not very good, but most of us are brilliant at spotting faces. We'll see them in clouds and plug sockets and dogs and mother-in-laws. Yes, 2 minutes, I get it. I've lost my point now.
We can see faces.
Yes, so actually being able to go somewhere and sit down and enjoy a show and go, wow, oh, actually that's a bit about me, kind of.
Yeah.
Is amazing. And whether that's a performance or a song or a painting, it's got to have a resonance to us. And if all we ever see is things that resonate to everybody else in the room but not us, it tricks us into thinking we're the only one in the room. We don't notice the other people who aren't laughing. And that's why it's important to me.
And I think with bisexuality, I think there's such a huge misconception as well that it's just this phase. Like you're either straight or you're gay, and that is it. There's no in between. You cannot like both, because I definitely remember multiple occasions where I've disclosed that I'm a bisexual woman, and I've had the same response, which has been like, you're just so greedy. Like, oh my God, like, make up your mind. Is there a man or a woman that you... Bitch, both. The fuck? Like, why do I need to choose for who? Like, to appease you? Nah.
Also, oh, Q&A time. Don't worry. Can I?
No, go on.
Sorry.
Don't let him stop you. You talk. I'm joking.
What was I saying? Just in response, just to that point, I had like, when I was invited, I kind of had some sort of reservations, because for me, the term bisexual is very outdated, because I don't describe myself as that, as you heard in the intro. That's not me. I would use the word pansexual, and that's because of my lived experience as a trans person. Bisexuality is very binary, and that's not for me. So if I am dating someone, I'm getting to know someone, and that's how they present themselves in the world, they're not for me. And that's it in response to that.
Cool. Okay. Well, we're going to do the Q&A now. So Simon here has got some microphones, and oh, both of you have. Okay, don't fight. Quick discussion. Right. There are definitely questions, I can assure you. Hello, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Steph. I had a quick question, just briefly touching on what you said about representation in the media and stuff, and I think a lot, you mentioned Heartstopper, and we I think some people may be aware of the fact, obviously, what happened to somebody like Kit Connor being sort of his own personal, or his personal sexuality being sort of demanded. This, and you were talking about artists, you know, feeling like you've got to kind of part that. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how necessary you kind of think it is with regard to representation that people who are bisexual play bisexual parts or play, you know, like, I think it's a really slippery slope, and, you know, whether you're doing something that's a personal art project or whether you're doing something that's mass consuming, is there a difference, and do you feel like it matters?
Good question. I think, I mean, obviously what happened with Kit Connor, and it's happened a lot and happened to lots of different people. I think there's a real, I watched a really interesting video the other day, I wish I could remember the creator, I'm sorry, about like how the term queer baiting has like really evolved from this thing that was like a literary device to something that is being applied to real life people. And I think when you talk about a slippery slope, I think things like that is where we start getting on a really slippery slope, when people feel entitled to anything from someone, but particularly when it's something that is mass consumed. And I think that's where the danger zone is, because, you know, I think what was really, I don't know if I have an answer to your question, but I think what is particularly sad about that case with Kit Connor was that, like, you know, the casting team for Heartstopper, it was so, like, they were trying really hard to make it as diverse and as, like, you know, for the right people for the right role. And I think that, like, anyone who watched Heartstopper and then felt like the right thing to do was to, like, shame someone into, like, having to come out, well, then you didn't get it. Yeah. What were you watching? You didn't get it. You did not understand what you just watched and say that you love. I don't know, I feel like I have not in any way answered your question, but I feel quite strongly about it.
But I do think as well that there are enough queer people who are actors to fill these roles as well. Yeah. Like, I feel like whoever it is that's created this thing, they have to ask themselves a question, which is, am I just picking these people because I want this to sell, or is there an important message here that I want it to get across? Yeah. And I feel like that kind of defines who it is that you are assigning these roles to, personally.
I'm going to answer your question a slightly different way, in the sense that just looking at all the research that's happened around bisexuality and performance, what's really, really harrowing to see is that the body of research that exists is constantly talking about bisexual people as having a bit of straight traits, a bit of homosexual traits mixed together, and somehow put in a blender and we magically appear as bisexual performances. And it's really not the case. We have our own culture, we have our own ability to say who we are and what that means on a stage. And quite a lot of the time queer baiting is happening because people are looking at, I mean, one of the other big cases that happens quite a lot is people accuse Harry Styles of queer baiting for dressing a certain way, for looking a certain way, and they're trying to see and code what is happening with this individual, when really that shouldn't be the way that we approach these things, because you cannot watch on the stage and tell who is a bisexual performer. Yeah. And people have tried so much to come and tell us what we are, who we are, and what we do. And, you know, there's such a diversity of different identities and how we actually express ourselves, that queer baiting and the way it's kind of constructed sociologically, I don't think is a good approach and a healthy approach to have, because we're all so different. And you can't tell by looking at someone, you can't tell by the way they act what sexuality they are, and you shouldn't be making judgments based on that.
Yeah.
Hello. Thanks so much. It's been really interesting to listen to. I want to ask about negative stereotypes, because people talk, particularly on obviously social media, all the time about what is whose story to tell. But I've watched particularly films, indie films, where the writer, director, lead actors are all queer, and they still play to every negative stereotype in the book. So it's a tough one, because they tell whatever stories they want to tell, but at the same time, the general public doesn't know the difference. They're just seeing some with negative stereotypes in. They don't care often if the creators are queer or not. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's just easy, lazy writing. You've got 90 minutes to tell a story, and you're going to do it the simplest, cheapest, quickest way, and people will have the easiest way of understanding. And the problem is that the bisexual tropes, the person who can't make their mind up about the gender they want to go out with, therefore is also indecisive about other things, and also can't commit to other things, and therefore is some, manic pixie dream boyfriend or whatever. It's something that the public recognizes and seems to have an appetite for. And I think the solution to it is funding more queer films by queer creators who want to tell slightly more complicated stories about actual people and not cartoon characters.
I think, you're absolutely right. And I think following on from that, I think something that comes up a lot is that the complexity of bisexuality or pansexuality is sometimes, people argue that it's sometimes hard to do that within film because it's such a specific time that it's very hard to get the many layered, beautiful, wibbly wobbly greyness of us through the story. Whereas when you look at like television series, often, well, recently there have been some more successful bisexual representation because they have because when it's in an episodic format, they have more time and more space to explore the complexities of what bisexuality or pansexuality is. But I think I totally agree with you. It's that more funding, more voices, more opportunities. Someone? Anyone?
I was going to say, it's oftentimes, like you were saying, especially commercially, especially in TV and film, it's the quickest, cheapest way to do anything, which then means you bypass conversations and you bypass conversations with people outside the room, because with the right money, right time, community consultants are a thing. Writers, consultant writers, bringing people in of those lived experiences and identities, that is a very big thing. But when you're working in these sorts of spaces with a really tight idea and structure, there's only so much they could do. So like you're saying, it's about expanding the opportunity to develop these stories over time and not just expect it in your 90 minutes, because that's never going to happen. So
another question over here. I'm where we want to get through some more questions before time runs out.
My question sort of flows on from that. I think taking someone like the Todd from Scrubs, do you think that as creators we have responsibility to deconstruct the hypersexuality or especially bisexual behaviour in the media?
Yeah.
Is it our responsibility, or should it be perceived differently?
It's tough, isn't it? It's really. I find it's really tough because as an actor, I am given a script. There is a director that's saying, well, this is the thing that we're doing. So as much as I can bring something of my creativity to whatever it is I'm doing, the hierarchy of that situation means that I'm not necessarily always in a place where I can do anything as much as I might want to. So I have a voice, obviously, and I might feel like I can stand up and say something, but I think it becomes really hard when we're, as an individual, to try and do that, because I feel like it's something that has to happen together. Because I just don't know how else. How do you take something like the Todd and just disastrous, horrible.
Yeah.
Gross.
And I think also, sorry to cut you, I think also, when we are presented with, I'm not an actress, but I know that if I had a script, if anyone wants to give me a script, I'm here. But I know that if I was handed over a script for a bisexual role and there was something in there that I thought, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that I'm doing this role, am I really going to challenge you? I don't know. I'm first gen. So my mum, who's an immigrant, she was very much so, you have to be very grateful that you're in this country. And I kind of feel like low-key, that's been instilled in me a little bit. So I don't know if I would actually approach you and be like, hey, this is a bit, let's switch it up. Because in my mind, there's not many roles here for me. So take it.
Yeah.
I don't have the answers, basically, which is what I'm saying.
We have no answers to anything.
I mean, also at the end of the day, there are some people who do conform to stereotypes. And to go in the opposite direction and to say, well, bisexual people are, you know, all extremely normal and stable and boring, and none of us particularly enjoy sex, is you know, crashingly wrong about, well, several people in this room, for starters, naming my own names. But one of the things is that if we have got bad representation to react against, I don't think it's great that it's bad representation, but if nothing else, it gives us something to push on. And being completely ignored and completely invisibilized is much harder to react to than a bad stereotype. We can say, well, look, that doesn't look like us, all of us, all the time. But if there's nothing there, we wouldn't be having this panel. Have we got time for any more questions? Oh, hello.
Hello, I want to keep this nice and short. So,
We won't, don't worry.
Say again?
We won't, don't worry.
So, I run a Black men's mental health therapy, and it's fascinating. It's hardly half a year old, and I get many whatabouteries. So I get, what about all men? What about LGBTQ people? What about everyone? And I get a lot of the whatabouteries from people that are in our own queer community.
Yeah.
And my biggest question I want to ask is, how do we ensure that there's actual representation when there is technically a hierarchy? When we're talking about funding, when there's a hierarchy of funding, where when you see representation, you're not seeing enough kind of African, Caribbean, indigenous, Asian communities. So we talk about funding, but then we're not talking about where the funding is actually going.
Yeah.
Because already I'm getting people talking to me about funding. But how about if you kind of make it from just queer people, or why not just Black and Asian people? And I've worked in diversity for years. The amount of pushback I get from organizations when we talk about, for example, the murder of George Floyd, we hear companies say, oh, we need to add something for our kind of Asian colleagues, or something about for our own group. Don't get me wrong, everyone needs support, but let's deal with the community we're talking about at the time, which is today, which is bisexual and pansexual people. But I often find that in our own community, I'm often finding the most colorism, racism, and discrimination. What about it? So, what are your thoughts?
I think I'm glad someone brought up intersectionality, because that's that problem there. I don't think this island can deal with more than one at a time. So when you're talking about funding, you have to unfortunately separate the things in order to get the space, money, and opportunity to do something, which is unfortunate. But that's the climate we live in. That's what we were born into. I'm second generation, so like the island is the island, and it's been like this, and it hasn't changed. And now, having been an artist and then now being a behind-the-scenes person, is really hard to grapple that, because I often want to bring all my community into place. And the way I deal with it is sometimes I will just focus on the Black community, but by knowing that it's me who's curating the space, or it's me who's putting on the event, I know that if I signal it to my Black community, within that space, there will be other intersections there, just by default. So that's how I deal with it, but it's a very difficult thing to do, because when you're getting funded, they like to see sometimes a bit of intersectionality, but not too much. And it depends on the industry, which intersection, so it's very difficult, and it's a lot of trial and error, but for me, that's how I've gone about it, because as a Black person, that's the first, I guess, perception of me outside of the world, and so we're looking for funding and all that stuff, that's where we'll start.
I'm Latina, so being a queer Latina within itself is like, oh my God, because culturally, it's not a thing that's ever discussed. Even having discussions around sex is even still very taboo. So to now come out and just be like, hey, I am with a woman and I'm in love with her and it is what it is, like that within itself is just something major. To now like trying to find other Latinos who are queer and who are like I wouldn't say brave enough to come out, because I think that's just the wrong term to use, because it's not about who have the privilege to come out. Yeah, that within itself is just a bit like, okay, I can't force you to come out. I would never force anyone to come out. But if you lot aren't there with me, I'm going to have to naturally gravitate to, you know, white queer spaces that are out and stuff. And I have to do what I have to do to make sure that I also feel seen. And it's just I don't know, I just feel like within time, hopefully, these conversations, I don't know, me personally, I know my Latino family ain't changing their views and shit. They're like, that shit's wrong, and that's it. And it's just something that I have to really ask myself, do I want to deal with that, or do I not? Do I separate myself, or do I stay? I've forgotten your question, but...
When I set up Cabaret, which is a cabaret night for bisexual people, clues in the name, somebody I know who does Freddie Mercury tribute came to me and said, well, I would be brilliant for this. Freddie Mercury was bisexual, I'll come along and I'll do this. And I said to him, that's great, however, I'm really, you know, prioritizing bisexual, pansexual, you know, bi-plus performers. And his attitude was, well, who are you to tell your audience what they should and shouldn't see? I said, well, I'm the producer of the show. But it was just, it's such an automatic, you know, but why can't I be a part of this? You know, there's a little 3-panel cartoon of the little people drawing as blob creatures saying, we don't feel welcome here, we'll go and create our own space. They go and create their own space, and all the other ones come along and go, well, why aren't we allowed in here either? And then you go and form another community somewhere else, and they follow you. Because if you look like you're having a good time, everyone wants in. And sometimes we're having a good time because we're having the conversation we can't have with the rest of society there, whichever bits of it is. We've got to be able to have, and I think this is why spaces like this will persist, no matter how homogenized culture becomes over the years. I don't think it'll get that homogenized, but we're always going to have conversation spaces where we can say, yes, everything is fine, but have you noticed the way that when we bring up this, they always say that? When we ask for this, they always say, but you've got those. Or we buy funding, well, you know, we donated all of this money to LGBT projects, so some of that's going to have gone to bisexual people by default. It's like, yes, it might have.
I think just to pick up on that point about funding as well, another really important part of it is to actually be calling out for the funders of what they're actually doing. And I know quite a few people who've used freedom of information requests to actually go into the funders and get stats to say, how many bisexual people have you funded?
Yep.
And to look at the breakdown of where the funding is actually going, and to actually then call them on it, because they're just putting us in this huge umbrella and saying, only this funding is going to LGBT people, but how is it being split down? How is it recognizing the intersectionality as well? So I think that we could all have a responsibility, if we see it, to send in those freedom of information requests, to call them out and make a really big noise about it and say you're not actually delivering for the communities that you say you are.
And also, I feel like, as well, I think everybody needs to understand that, yeah, we all may be queer, but my experience as a Latino queer woman is completely different to a white queer person or to a black queer person. And yeah, that is the actual facts of it. So if I am going to create a queer Latin space, nobody needs to be inserting themselves, because everyone's experience is so different. Let me have what it is that I want to have with my community. And it's not saying that this other community or this other race is excluded from that, but the facts are that society view me different.
Yeah. Thank you.
Going on the train, like, regardless of me being queer or not, people don't see that.
Yeah.
They see me as a dirty, scary black man. That's why I made the black people come. And yeah, I still get people saying what about me. But I know there'll be people I'll be sitting next to here, they'll move their back because they see me or my friends. So, I think representation for the people where they are at is important. And maybe we can have a wider discourse, but let people come together and to understand.
Absolutely.
This community isn't as strong as we get see put out
Well done for creating that as well. Give yourself a round of applause.
Well, that's about all we've got time for. It is, he told me. Thank you for that, and that was the one we ended on. We hadn't got to that, I'd have been sad. We need to clear off and let the next lot of people come in here and discuss the next thing, I believe is happening in 4 minutes. So I don't even know what it is. But thank you very much to our panel, Pacheanne, Milena, Sam, and Carly. Thank you to our signing team over here, and to our By Pride volunteers here and at the back. There's discussions going on all weekend in this room, so do come back to these. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. Hopefully we'll see you again later. Thank you.